It's timely, it's insightful, it's motivating, it's empowering. It's Time with Fred, your inspirational broadcast with host Fred Gaddy.
So hello to our listeners and welcome to another edition of Time with Fred. If this is your first time tuning in, this is an inspirational broadcast featuring inspiring stories and life lessons to challenge you to be the best you can be. This program airs, you can watch us live in video on my Facebook page at Fred Gaddy Life Coach and on my YouTube page as well. And this also airs as a podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and also Google Play. So we all have a choice in every moment of our lives, choices in what we say, what we do, how we react, and more. There are so many choices in each moment every day, whether you need to adjust to circumstances and change, or whether you want to take control of the reins. So this is a process that can be used time and time again to rebalance and adjust. In today's edition of Time with Fred, we'll discuss the 10 points of change. And this is a program that's supposed to help us navigate any hurdles or situations we face on the journey to becoming our best. And what better time to talk about change than the times that we're going through right now. And with me as my special guest is Elizabeth Hamilton Guarino, one of America's most trusted mindset, leadership, and personal and corporate development consultants. Elizabeth has helped thousands around the globe to be the best and achieve world-class excellence. As a trusted leader, influencer, consultant, trainer, and speaker, and Hay House author, she provides development and training to individuals and organizations around the world. Elizabeth graduated with honors from St. Ambrose in Davenport, Iowa, and Harvard Business School, where we actually met during the course that we took together. Elizabeth is a recipient of the 2019 Excellence in Finance, the Leaders Award for her significant contribution towards the financial sector. Elizabeth, I want to welcome you to today's edition of Time with Fred.
It's so nice to be here with you. What a great title for your show, too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Love
Thank
it.
you so much. And I appreciate you coming, Elizabeth. And in a time that, change is, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I made a statement. I said, if anyone had told me at the beginning of 2020 that in a few months, the whole world will be turned upside down and disrupted by a virus, no one would have believed it. What an opportunity time to discuss this topic of change, Elizabeth. What are your thoughts on that?
Gosh, what aren't all of our thoughts on it, right? We're all, the word I keep coming up with is, well, two of them actually, adjustments and displaced. Mm-hmm. We're all so much of that. And of course, change and so forth. But, a lot of us think of change as a choice that we make, like, oh, I want to lose 25 pounds, or I want to set my New Year's resolutions, or on my birthday, I want to do this or that, sort of as goals to change our life in one way or another, drink more water, whatever it is. But this is a different kind of change. And these are when the phone rings, and, whether it's the changes that you don't expect that you're coping with or dealing with. And those take sometimes tools in your toolbox to deal with. And so no matter what kind of change is happening, it takes time, commitment, and discipline. We know that to implement change. But it's a question for all of us. How do we rebalance and adjust to what's going on right now? And we're all learning kind of as this is new for all of us, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. And as the founder of the Best Ever You Network, Elizabeth, one of the things that you write about, or that you wrote about, that I saw was the 10 points of change. But before we get into those details, can you tell us a little bit about what the Best Ever You Network is and what you do for
so the best, thank you for this opportunity, Fred. So the Best Ever You Network is a multimedia company that provides personal development to people worldwide. All of the resources on there are basically free, unless you want to call and do one-on-one coaching or take a class, those types of things. But we have over 500 radio shows now, all free, each just about an hour long. Wow. So you can click on the Best Ever You show on Best Ever You. We have an awards program that we've had for, gosh, probably about 10 years now, that we're bringing up on a new website and carrying content over. So it's kind of an old website and a new website. We took all the old content and put it over on Best Ever You Network. And so besteveryou.com is sort of getting a fresh look. It's hard to take websites down and edit them and edit them and then put them back up. We edit real time. So you'll see us actually changing from day to day and growing. But it's a blogging platform. Anybody can join. Not everybody can blog. We do set permissions for that and so forth to access to write, to become a contributor on the website. But, for the most part, we say yes if somebody's got a story to share or something like that. But we're a huge network of people all helping us all change, be our best, and do things like this. So it's a very connected community, I would say. With some, people, I love the thought leaders on there. Have you looked at that by any chance?
Yes.
I love our thought leaders.
Yeah, lots of good information. But Elizabeth, you're also an author. You're an author of 3 books, right? You wrote the Percolate, right? Let your best soul filter through, and then 2 other children's books. Can you talk just a little bit about that before we jump right into change tonight?
Oh yeah. So Percolate is a Hay House book. It was published in 2014, and it is a 9-point process of change. Best Ever You was founded on 10 points. There's 9 of them in Percolate, and it's all coffee metaphors and basically the same thing, but you get your dose of coffee with it. And then there's 2 children's books that I recently wrote with the great Sally Huss, and she's illustrated and written over 100 children's books.
Wow.
She's former Occidental. She's in the Occidental Hall of Fame for tennis, and she's a former Wimbledon finalist. So she's amazing, so talented. And so I got a chance to collaborate with her and took it. Fabulous. We wrote a book about food allergies because I have life-threatening food allergies, and then we wrote a book about self-confidence for girls. Wow. So Self-Confident Sandy and A Lesson for Every Child Learning About Food Allergies are those 2.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really, really proud. Those are 2 new additions. And then we have probably in the next month or so, Best Ever You is going to be launching its first in a series of journals.
Wow.
And
ending, right? Taking advantage of the moment and everything else. That's great.
Trying to make the best of it, because it's not the best moment for so many. So if we can put tools out there that help people feel better, that's our goal. And I think we're trying to, we're achieving that. That journal is beautiful. Chris Fuller has had a hand in that, and the 10 points of change here.
That's great.
Yeah, Chris Fuller and I kind of go hand in hand. She's the CEO of Your Life Sparkles, and we're all about gratitude, compassion, and collaboration.
That's great.
That's needed.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. And you talk about making the best out of life, right? I mean, we touched on it a little bit in the introduction with COVID-19 and what's happened in Minneapolis over the last week or so, sparking having all those ripple effects across the nation. But let's talk a little bit about the 10 points of change, because change is one of those things that's always constant, right? Whether we like it or not, we're forced to change. So one of the first points that you talk about is assess, right? You write that in this first point. We practice self-awareness and self-reflection. We examine the truth and what we want to change and where we want to go in life, or what we want our life to go. If you don't know it, you can't change. So this is a point of honest reflection. If your car has no odometer, you would never know if you're speeding or not. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? I think that's so poignant here, considering everything else we're going through.
Well, yeah, and I think it all starts right here, and honesty and truth. That's the one thing, when you sit and lie to yourself, there's no other way to say it, you're lying to yourself. And so really an honest assessment of everything, of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing, what you're drinking, what you're eating, all of it. And so we have a little handy dandy assessment that we give on Best Ever You, and it's free. We're actually going to be putting it back out there in the next week or so. We've revised it a little bit, but it is that moment where you sort of examine the truth. And also examine, maybe in this situation, examine where you are, like what's happened and how you're reacting and responding and what you're going to do, because it will still also fall under the trial and error points that we go through as we try and change something. For example, I have 4 boys. Their ages 18 to 24, and we had to go get all of them from college. And in one case, their entire NCAA baseball season is canceled. And so there's massive change going on. It's not just for people missing a graduation or a birthday or this or that or another thing. We're all working from home. We're schooling from home. We're graduating from home. We're eating takeout. We're, all of it. It's all changed.
Yes.
And so that assessment is important. And you might not be very happy right now.
And
right?
you talk about the self-awareness piece. Why is it important to be self-aware of what's happening? Why don't we just, act in oblivion and just, ignore everything else? Why is it important to be in touch, to be aware of what's going on? Well,
without that, you don't have the capacity or the open mind to respond. I guess you can. I mean, it's your choice. And that's the thing of it, I'll just go with I'll explain it in terms of like our freshman at RIT, his freshman year at RIT cut in half. He has a choice in that moment. He can quit and get Fs and flunk out, or he can get As. And that's what we all have that choice from the start of the change. For example, I was on the phone 2 days ago with someone who had lost their job. And we talked about setting a timer for grief. And I think she was going to run over the timer a little bit, but, setting a timer to the point where, we're going to wallow a little bit and we're going to feel miserable and we're going to do this and do that. But then we're going to move on forward positive and use it as a launching pad. And I think I was on a call earlier, and I think some of these things are great to talk about. And sometimes in practice, they're tricky. Mm-hmm. They really are. They take practice. But the fact that we're on a call like this, just talking about change, it opens the door for discussions. And that's really what you want to have, is because my version of change might not be your version of change, but these are pretty tested and true. And you can apply these to your life and maneuver through change pretty well. If we don't get stuck in number 1, constantly assessing. A lot of people get stuck in 1 through 4, and that's the hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm. 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 You talk about choice, which I think is interesting here, because there's a lot that's happening to us, and we can either choose to remain in the past and complain and gripe about everything else happening, Elizabeth, or we can choose intentionally what we do with our lives. Rather, a lot of us who are home, and again, not to minimize what people have gone through with all the the deaths and all of that, but some of us have time on our hands, right? We're working from home, and how do we choose, or how do we make the best out of what's happening? That almost has to do with being intentional, right? With how we will manage our time and everything else. That's probably the second point, right? In your 10 points, in your 10-step program. Why choice, or how does choice play into what we're doing right now?
Well, I like the way you said that. Actually, we may have to include that. It's very intentional. And again, you make a very good point too. We're all not at doing the same exact thing and so forth. So this might apply very differently to people depending on what's going on in their lives and so forth. But like the person who lost their job last week, it is a choice, like you said, whether to, wallow and be all sad and self-pity and woe is me. And that can go on and on and on for as long as you choose, until you choose not to do that. And at the moment you start to choose, you allow, through your assessment and choosing and so forth, more to come, what really might be meant to be. For example, you might look back 5 years and go, wow, I'm kind of glad that's hard to say, but I'm kind of glad that I lost that job, because if I hadn't had that, I might have been still stuck there, and I wouldn't have gotten this $25,000 raise in this job, or whatever it is. It just completely depends, but choice is is key right here. That honest assessment and that choice of how we're going to think, act, respond, take responsibility for ourselves, all of it. It's like a person who is assessing, going, I drink too much, or I eat too much sugar, or I don't walk enough or exercise enough. All those things we're assessing. And a lot of times that comes with really unhealthy language towards ourselves as well. And it's that moment where we choose and say, okay, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to be my best. Get this, I'm out running with our college baseball player every morning. That's a sight to see. I'm walking.
You're doing it, you're doing it.
No, I'm really doing it. But I have a joke. He runs up the hills he runs up the hills for me and I run down them for him. But there's choices in every moment, and especially, with respect to people, we have a very huge choice of how we engage other people. And it is profound when we touch each other's lives with grace, compassion, kindness, gratitude, collaboration, and a better sense of humanity.
Yes.
For sure. Humanity is so big running throughout all of this, because I don't believe in this philosophy of trampling on people to get what you want and so forth. I love the thought of conscious ambition. I know I'm off on a tangent other than change, but conscious ambition and humanity run solidly through the Best Ever You network and through our principles of change and our 6 core principles as well.
Well, absolutely. And especially now, right, in this racially charged environment, when there's hate and all that pent up anger. Yes, we need that. We need that mercy. We need that compassion across both sides, right? So.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. So spot on.
Oh.
Yeah. And the third point.
Forever too. Not just now. Forever.
Yeah.
For years, past and forward.
Yes.
It's humanity.
Yeah.
It's not about much more than that.
That's
goodness.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And the third point you talk about is discover. And you said, like a scientist taking new data or tasting a new blend of coffee, this is where we learn about ourselves, to establish values, goals, and beliefs, and to start to put that in line with our behavior. Can you share a little bit about the discovery process and how we can apply that to our own lives?
So I'm going to keep going with the Cameron mom running theme, because it might apply. Yeah, I think sometimes examples like this are easier to digest when there's an example running through it to give it an example. But, as I'm out there day one running, I got about halfway down the street. I'm like, oh my, I'm out of breath. And then I was like, oh, there's a hurdle to cross. I stopped and I'm kind of drinking water and I'm like, okay. So, when you decide to change something, you discover very quickly where you need to improve, what you're good at, what you're terrible at even. I am not good at running,
right,
but I'm going to improve and get healthier and so forth. So this is just it's like a scientist with a clipboard, taking in information. So let's say you've assessed the situation, you're 100 pounds overweight, you've decided to make a change in your life to get healthy, be your best, healthiest you. And now you're like, well, how am I going to do that? What works for me? What doesn't? Am I going to put the cream and the sugar in my coffee? Am I going to ditch the diet soda? Am I going to go wogging down my block? But that's the discovery where you fiddle around with, what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah. That's amazing. And then that leads us to that fourth step, which is grow. And you're right that we practice. This is what we practice, we refine, and we redefine. As we practice these new steps with family, friends, coworkers, think, ponder what produces positive results, what doesn't, keep and expand, and what makes you a better you. Growth, right? I mean, it's as we go through all of this, through the trials, through the failures, through all of that, at the center of all of that is growth. How does one discover growth in spite of everything else that we go through, Elizabeth?
Collectively too, right? all of this could be applied collectively versus individually. It's however you want to digest the information. But in Percolate, this is grow from bean to brew. And this really is where you've taken the data, you've discovered this or that. And really at this point too, you've also made yourself quite uncomfortable, sometimes intentionally. It is not fun to run down the block. It's not fun to not eat a whole pizza. It's not, there's so many things that it's not fun. And we grow when we make ourselves uncomfortable in ways. And that's a lot of, that's learning. And again, running through this, that open-minded, lifelong learning, humanity approach. I like the fact that in Best Ever You, when we wrote this a long time ago, we've always included family, friends, coworkers, siblings, sons, daughters, spouses, all of that in this, because sometimes there's a bunch of different ways that you can be surrounded. Yeah. And it's so nice when you're surrounded by people who support you and love you when you're trying to make a change, especially. There's nothing worse than when you're trying to, lose 50 pounds and somebody is like, hey, let's go get pizza. You're like, oh, that doesn't work. So the growth moments are, I think, so important to surround yourself with love.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you touched briefly on that fifth point here, which is support. And I couldn't agree with you more. There's been countless of times when I've had guests on this show who, in trying to overcome maybe either an adversity, mentioned the fact that they had a strong support system, whether it was a network, a family member, a teacher, or a trusted friend or a child, but someone who helped them get to, right, or go through that adversity. And you write that this is where we overcome and ask. This can be a moment where we ask for help from others, we seek professional help, heal, and so forth. This can be a huge pivotal moment for people in how we move from being stuck to taking action and taking the right action so we don't fall back on old habits and patterns that don't serve us well.
Yeah. So in 4, a lot of times people get stuck on 2 and 3, and 4 is where you dare venture off the hamster wheel. 1, 2, 3, and a little bit of 4 are why New Year's resolutions don't work. They get stuck right in there doing the same thing over and over and over again until they experience that growth moment and really have found something that challenges them in the right, like a right action, for example. And a lot of the times that can be with who you're surrounding yourself with, the support, like you've talked about from here. But huge, this is that moment where you're off the hamster wheel, you're there, and you found some of the right actions that propel you toward what you're actually trying to do. You're going to start to feel success right here. Yeah. And have a sense where if somebody puts the pizza in front of you, you're not going to eat it, or you're going to have one slice, for example. I keep using the weight loss. Yeah. A lot of people, I've helped a lot of people lose over 100 pounds. A lot of people use Percolate for weight loss. And so weight loss and well-being, as well as coping with job changes or sometimes irreversible health problems and so forth. So support's key, especially lately. I've been thinking a lot about caregivers and how their whole lives have changed as well. For example, like my friend Chris Fuller, who I do a lot with Best Ever You, during the pandemic, her husband on February 26th was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And talk about a moment to decide how you're going to be. I mean, we've put this blog out during that period of time. We've written a journal. We've had a lot of deep discussions about life-changing and bad days, good days, all of it. And so I think a lot about people facing adversity, like you were talking about, in whatever form it is, and using this process to kind of see where they're at and know that they can get through.
And I'd venture to say, Elizabeth, here without dwelling too much on this point, is it requires some type of vulnerability, right, at this stage, because some of us been wired to or conditioned to do it all, right? I got this, and especially we men, when it comes to emotions, it takes a true mark of strength, really, to ask for help, to say, look, I'm hurting, I need your help. Oftentimes it's perceived as weakness. That the best analogy that comes to mind is a drowning person, right, who needs help to be rescued, and as long as they continue to resist and fight, they can't be rescued. They'd have to give up every attempt, every desire in them to save themselves, right? That's really at the point where they can be saved. So how do you reconcile that battle that goes back and forth between, hey, I don't want to be perceived as weak, I want to appear as strong, with really saying, look, I'm hurting, I need help, I can't figure this all by myself, and I need your help. How do you reconcile those conflicts that take place in our sometimes when we're wanting help or we need that support from others?
Right. And so that person is all the way at one, because that's that honest, truthful assessment that you're having with yourself, where you're asking for help and so forth. And that is vulnerable. You're so right on with the word vulnerable. I love that word and hate that word all in one. It's a scary moment to say to yourself, "Ooh boy, I'm drinking too much," or "Ooh boy, I'm doing this too much," or "I need to change that," or "I need to get divorced or get married," or whatever it is. And a lot of times we're having that discussion with ourselves, and we don't realize until as we start to change at point 5, we might need a little bit more help to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And so that the support system in 5 is more about surrounding yourself. It could be a give up moment. It could be a point where you need more knowledge. It could be a this or that, but you've made the decision way back in 1. With that honest assessment, and now you're going. But you're right. And also I heard you say, like a guy who doesn't want to admit or anything like that. I am so blown away by the volume of guys that use Best Ever You. We're 50-50 in our demographics. Do you know that? You would think that it would be all women and we're talking and we're this and we're that. I get so proud of guys like David Strauss and Ivan Meisner, who's a thought leader of ours, and Fred Cuellar, who will talk about his stroke, all these people who've overcome these things. And they talk, and they're guys, and they talk openly. They set such marvelous examples for all of us, and serve as that support network for sure. So whether you're at 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, or whatever it is, that's one of the things about the Best Ever You network too. There's always somebody that you can reach out to and we'll direct. It's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Awesome to know that asking for support or asking for help is not a sign of weakness, right? You gotta be vulnerable enough to get that
sign of strength. Yeah. Actually, it's the reverse. People view it, because it's scary. You don't want somebody to know something's wrong with you, or that you've secretly, there's a saying, what you eat in private, you wear in public. Mm-hmm. And people think about that, and they feel shame, and they feel like guilt, they feel this or that. And so I we have a lot of things we think about ourselves that other people aren't necessarily thinking about us. Yeah. You'd be surprised. It's like the person who goes to the gym and thinks everybody's looking at them in their sweatpants or whatever. And really, if you look around, people are all there just trying to be their best too. They're happy for you. They're like, you go. Another 10 minutes on the treadmill. Yay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I got to ask you this, Elizabeth, is there a responsibility on us? When I say us, if someone comes to me, for instance, to ask for my help, and I have a friend who was going through some personal struggles and needed someone he could talk to, right? He had talked to people in the past, and all he was met with was judgment. And so he was really, cautiously, contemplating whether he needed to come out. And I just sat and listened. I didn't have any thoughts. I didn't have any words of advice. I just listened. And you could tell how much of a relief that was for him just to have someone listen. Is there a responsibility on our part for life, or for whoever you are? Someone comes to you and and wants you to just listen, is there a responsibility to resist that tendency to pass judgment and just maybe just be lend a listening ear to help that healing process of others who come to us for help?
Oh, I think so much. That's such a wonderful question, Fred. Because there's nothing better than, like, even you listening right now to me, it's like, oh, I want to talk about that or whatever. But, there's nothing better than great listeners. You can be a great talker, but when you're talking, you're not really listening all that much. And if you're listening to always respond, or fix, like what might be a natural thing, somebody's got a problem, so let's fix it. We're not promising that at all through this. I'm not promising that I'm going to have the answer to fix you. If I listen to you, that I'm going to fix everything. I might give you things to think about. You can ask questions, you can do whatever. But yeah, I think we do, actually, to answer the question directly, have that responsibility to listen. You might need to redirect. You might need to reach out for more help for the person. Again, it just depends on what they come and ask you for, of course. But there's nothing better than a great listener who doesn't judge. There's nothing worse, I think, that when you're like, oh, I need some help with this. And like, let's say I came to you and said, I need to do this or that, and I've been doing this. And then you're like, oh, I don't want to be your friend anymore. I just found that out about you. That's a horrible feeling. Have you ever had that happen to
yeah,
you?
absolutely.
I have too.
Yes.
Yeah. I can think about, I remember I had a year in college. I don't drink or smoke or do drugs or prescription drugs or anything, but I had one bad year in college where I was like drinking everything in sight. And I said to my friend, I've really got to stop doing that. I'm literally, drinking all of the town. It's just really drinking. I'm drinking all the alcohol in this town, kind of just a bad,
Yep.
bad kids do that when they're in college. And she didn't want to be my friend anymore.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, you were my friend all through high school. Just because I said that, and judgment instantly. Yeah, we don't drink. We don't do that. You're horrible. You're this, you're that. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's a long life, kind of thing. And I've never kind of gotten over that moment. And that was a moment for me where I'm like, wow, I will never do that to somebody if I can help it. I know better than to do that now because it happened to me.
Thanks again so much for that. But support, what in your case, for instance, I mean, you try to confide in a friend or open up to a friend, and they don't want to be friends with you. What do you do when you try to do that? You're trying to get support from someone you trust, and they cut you off. You're ostracized, and your ego is bruised, and you decide, never again am I going to allow myself to be vulnerable. Never again am I going to ask for help anymore. And we bottle these emotions.
People do that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a
how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of times where that's happened more than once in my life, where you're like, oh boy, I shouldn't have said that, and then you do exactly what you're saying. It's, again, guess what? You get another choice, and you get to listen to them and be like them and give up, or you can be like, they've got their own issues, don't they? And not judge, and not, don't be mean back. I'm not saying like that, because that is kind of, they're protecting themselves for a reason as well. You don't know exactly what's happening in their life either, that they don't want to hear you and help you. So it's a moment where, you guess what? You get to go back and choose, and you're going to get maybe a little stuck back on the hamster wheel a little bit before you get back off and figure out who is going to support you if you need support. You might have to just, knock on another door. It's life.
All right. So again, thank you so much, Elizabeth. We're going to pick this up. This is just so much information. We're going to break this up and pick up on part 2 on our next session. So stick around and join us on part 2.